Disclaimer, I just want to say this is a mug game and this is not to be taken seriously, so YouTube staff, thank you for understanding that this is just for entertaining purposes, please don't ban me.
The Soviet Union. The red blob that spawned from Russia and that would go on to have a lot of influence worldwide. But what if that didn't happen? What if the Reds lost to the Whites? Well, that's basically what happened to the Soviets in the Kaiserreich timeline. But just because the Reds were defeated, that doesn't mean that they were eliminated. So we will be achieving what Lenin couldn't by restoring the USSR as none other than Latvia. Yep, you heard that right, Latvia. So, because the October Revolution's anniversary is right around the corner by the time this gets released, I thought it would be quite fitting to do probably the hardest thing in Kaiserreich. As if you thought reclaiming Germany's the Baltic Duchy was hard, ooh boy, you have no idea how hard this will be. Anyway, starting up the game, Latvia doesn't appear in the start of the game. So, for that we will need to spawn it by basically destroying the Baltic Duchy as such. And because I already have covered this like event chain in my Baltic Duchy miniseries, which you probably should check out, shameless self-sponsor over, I will go over this pretty quickly. Oh no, Black Monday has reached the Duchy, oh no! Oh no, we have a deadlock in the land tag, so that means nothing will happen. The Latvians and Estonians have taken to the streets to rebel, oh no! A coalition to fix the duchy was proposed, but the two sides couldn't agree, so now even the old Bolsheviks are returning and we can't do anything about them. Oh no! Because our government sucks, the military took over, but even that didn't save the duchy, and now Estonia and Latvia are independent. Oh no! Well, that certainly was a summary of all these events. Now that we are Latvia, we're pretty much fucked right from the get-go, as we are a poorer and a worse version of the Baltic Duchy with some horrible debuffs you have to take care of. But hey, at least we're independent now. But just because we are independent from German rule, we still have some problems, as now the ideological battle has started between the military and the old Bolsheviks vying for power. But those damn Germans will not give up, so with the help of the old Bolsheviks, the remaining German resistance was swiftly crushed. But now here comes the ugly part. The military rule under Kurelis tried to silently arrest Peters. But this has backfired, as Peters is 2 steps ahead of Kurelis. And before he could find Peters in time, Peters found Kurelis' hiding spot and has taken over Latvia, securing a new socialist future. First order of business is to fix the internal, economical and agricultural situation of the country before deciding on what type of socialism Latvia will follow. Unlike the rest of the syndicalist nations of the West, Latvia's leadership still clings on to the old ideas of Lenin, and while the most optimal option would be to adapt to a form of Western syndicalism, Peters has instead decided to go against that and look to the past. Oh, and just a minor nitpick here, why the fuck are the Bolsheviks radical socialists? Of all the socialist branches out there, one of the most authoritarian types is considered radical socialist next to the anarchist. I think I can see a bias here. Anyway, moving on. It's in Latvia's best interest to connect to the syndicalist West for protection, not just against the Germans, but also against the Russian bear in the East. Now it's time to introduce some much needed economical reforms and establish our new Red Army for the upcoming war in Europe by reorganizing our militia command structure into a centralized high command and a proper professional army. Also, yeah, for those who keep asking for my division templates, here they are, just regular 7.2s that normally include support companies like recon, engineers, anti-air, and artillery. And I say normally as I'm playing as bloody Latvia, so I really can't afford to build much of anything apart from artillery and guns, so that will have to suffice in this case. This wouldn't be a Soviet video if we didn't try some sort of collectivization to keep up with our glorious Bolshevik ideas, only for them to backfire immediately and with us having to deal with the consequences afterwards, but hey, that's the Soviet way. Anyway, the web trick started, so it was time for Latvia's entrance in the world stage. And what a horrible start we had, as the first attempt, of many, went horribly wrong, as all of Central Europe was on Germany's side. I mean that because Bulgaria won the war in the Balkans and the Socialist Italians failed miserably. So I was stuck in Western Latvia at this point with no way of pushing out, and basically this meant this run was over. So it was time to restart. Next attempt, things appeared to be going better as Austria had its crisis, so that meant Austria would be weaker when they would inevitably intervene in the Weltkrieg. Meanwhile, I helped my Spanish brothers win their civil war, so we could have a better chance of defeating the Germans. And even though Spain was secured, the Austria thing backfired as they defeated their revolts and even destroyed the Belgrade Pact that tried to intervene during the Danube crisis. Well, yikes. Anyway, I learned my lesson from before and helped my Italian comrades so that they wouldn't die to the Sicilians and we could have a bulwark against the Austrians. Oh, and because I almost forgot to mention, there are a few other focuses. Basically detailing how it's time to implement our Bolshevik ideas to the fullest as a testing ground for wider plans later, like political correctness, socialism in one country, and many more great ideas. But something interesting happened. During all of this, Russia had signed a non-aggression pact between themselves and the Ottoman Empire that divided the Middle East and Central Asia between themselves and established spheres of influence. Where have I seen that before? The important detail, and what you should remember, is that Russia in this case declared war on Georgia that was part of the Reich Pact, so that meant that Russia had declared war on Germany before France could. This would later be very beneficial. So as the Belt Creek was about to start, I decided to be the one that spilled the water from the glass by declaring war on Riga. After a while of sieging it down, it fell and Riga was ours. Knowing that we could not hold all of Latvia, we retreated behind the river line and sent our best boys west to help our French allies, as they would be useless in the east. Miraculously, they survived the voyage west and arrived to help the push towards Berlin. But that's when I noticed the defensive line broke as a result of the Russians being pushed back and Riga was about to fall. So in preparation for this, I sent all my equipment to the French, and after capitulating, I cancelled the Lend-Lease to keep my stuff. Great trick to avoid losing all of your equipment, mind I say. But just because Latvia was lost, the movement was not yet lost. We continued onwards and dealt a lot of casualties against the Germans, to the point it was the Latvian Red Army that captured the imperial capital of Berlin. And that's when I noticed a large influx of manpower, and that was because the Russians naval invaded Riga, so that meant that the manpower was now available for me. Using this, I tried to do a similar operation to queue up as much manpower as possible, as I was running dry on my divisions, but my plan failed miserably and the war quickly stagnated, so that was another failed attempt. But that's when it hit me. Maybe I was going about this the wrong way. Since I wanted to restore the USSR, defeating Germany was not going to help me in that goal, apart from making the French stronger and then still having to declare war on Russia. So in a twist of events, using the fact that the Russians had declared war on Germany earlier, and so it meant that the Russians and the French still didn't have a non-aggression pact, I declared war on Russia, called in the French, while signing a non-aggression pact with the Germans, betraying the revolution for a greater good. But as you could imagine, this went terribly wrong at the start and lost the Northern Front. But with German help, we quickly stabilized things and started my counter-offensive in various places. We pushed the Russians back into Russia proper, and now we were in the drive for Moscow. And yet again, it was the Latvians that captured the capital of a great power. The Latvian Red Army could not be stopped. So it was time to head north and capture the city of Petrograd, where a glorious revolution took place and avenge our fallen comrades. Encirclement after encirclement, the Russians were beaten back, and we would slowly reclaim rightful Latvian land that I would leech off by queuing up as much manpower in the recruitment tab as possible, so that even if I lost the state, I still had the manpower. By this point, the small little state of Latvia had inflicted over 140,000 Russian casualties, proving that the Bolshevik spirit was superior to any troop the Russians could muster. And so, to finally take the city that started it all, the troops were sent to the Finnish front, where the Russians would least expect a push. With the city captured and the supply hub lost in the region, the Russian troops were stuck and were swiftly eliminated. And with this would be the point where the horrible stage of the war would commence, as we would need to walk all the way over to central Siberia to defeat the Russians. So to avoid showing you a long time being wasted doing exactly that, let's just jump to the fall of their capital in Siberia. Yekaterinburg was captured, and with that, the Russians finally surrendered under the pressure of the German and our combined troops. And to be fair, I probably took more than I actually deserved from the war, so I will concede that maybe I overused, no, maybe not, I overused the player-led peace conferences, since I probably deserved more along the lines of this. But to be fair, at that point I was exhausted with all the failed attempts that I didn't show in the video, so come on, give me a break already. Like, there were at least like 7 failed attempts, so come on. But at long last, with Moscow in our hands and with our choice of sticking with the Bolshevik ideals, we can repudiate the failure of October and re-establish Lenin's vision. Before France, before Britain, the Russian Empire raised the red flag, overthrowing its masters in the Great October Socialist Revolution of 1917 under the wise leadership of Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Party. However, the material conditions of Russia proved to be insurmountable for the revolutionaries, and in a gruesome civil war, the revolution was destroyed by the reactionary powers. Those Russian socialists who survived eventually abandoned the Bolshevik ideals, believing them to have failed in practice, and adopted influences from the French and British syndicalists. But the Latvian socialists remained stalwart in their loyalty to the Leninist ideals. Before the revolution, Latvia was the Bolshevik party's greatest stronghold. It was the Latvian riflemen who formed the first units of the Red Army, so even after Soviet Russia was destroyed, the Latvian exiles kept the spirit of the party alive. Eventually, they established a modest stronghold in the Baltic Sea, and now they have returned to Moscow, where they may finally shed the shell of the Latvian Socialist Republic and restore the dream of Lenin, a Soviet Union of peoples of the former Russian Empire. Lenin, Trotsky, and the other martyrs of 1917 will be finally honored. And with that, we get a nice new focus tree, since there's still a lot to be done. As the rightful successor state to the Russian Empire, we must press our claims abroad, now that we're a proper player in the world stage. Next, we have to formalize the ideology, the set of beliefs that have gotten us this far, so it's time to give it a proper name. Our Latvian Red Army, while noble in its own right, is still too small for our big plans. So it's time to establish the proper Red Army of all of Eurasia. Of course, even if our great army is pretty important for a new state, we must never forget that the party stands above all else. And finally, if we are to take advantage of the German weakness, we must industrialize our control zones as fast as possible. With the basics now in place, it was time to betray our temporary allies and bring the revolution to Eastern Europe. With Poland mostly defeated, the way to Vienna was now open to our troops, so we made a mass dash to the Danube, ignoring most of eastern resistance in Ukraine and Belarus. And it worked wonderfully as the fall of Vienna and the most of the Habsburg Empire now in our hands. The war ended, and we quickly claimed all the land that we could to the French. We mostly took the worthless Siberian land, the lands that once belonged to the Russian Empire, such as Belarus and Ukraine, and maybe some little extras for good measure, like Silesia, just for good compensation. And with that, Europe had been liberated, but there was still a lot to be done. But that's for another time. And so that's the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed part 1 of this mini-series. I hope you await the second part where we will be liberating the oppressed proletariat of Eurasia. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more content like this, remember to subscribe as this really helps out the channel. You are dismissed, soldier.